So I'm working on a project involving a Raspberry Pi camera module, and it involves having the flex cable that connects the Pi and the camera be externally mounted. I can't really put it inside of a case or anything. So because of that, I wanted to try and find a cable with a bit more protection than these typically have. I tried to see if I could find any that had rubber sheaths, but I couldn't. So what I ended up doing is 3D printing this sheath around the cable using TPU. And this actually works quite well. The sheath itself is super flexible, but it completely covers the cable, and it's pretty strong. I'm not gonna try too hard to tear this apart with the cable inside. I think that potentially could still damage the cable, but in earlier tests without the cable inside, this stuff is pretty hard to tear. So I am quite optimistic as to how well this will hold up. And so now, let's talk about how I actually did this. So to start, I'm just going to create my sketch, and then make a rectangle. Then I'll just add these lines. I'll make the outer edges 1.2 millimeters thick, because since I'm dealing with a 0.4 millimeter nozzle, that means that these are 3 walls each. Then I'll make the thickness of the actual, or the width of the actual strip 12.5 millimeters, because I measured the the width of the flex cables to be 11.5. And then the length here, I'll just have that be 280, so I'm making a long cable. Okay, and that's the sketch. Simple as that. So now I'm going to press pull that to 8 millimeters. Oh, 0.8. And then the cavity inside, go to 5, or 0.5. And the bottom, negative 0.2. Okay. So this is the cable, basically, or the cable sheath. So I measured the cable plus the double-sided tape to have a thickness of 0.4 millimeters. So I'm making this 0.5 to give a little bit of clearance, because I don't want the TPU trying to pinch directly on top of the cable. It doesn't adhere, it's just going to slide around and create a mess. Anyway, now that I've created that, I'll take the body, rename it. And then save it. Okay, and now that that's done, we open it in Prusa Slicer and do the rest. Okay, so now we come into Prusa Slicer, and of course the first thing we do is import our model. Let's set it to the correct extruder, so we're actually printing in TPU. Alright, then we're going to add some custom settings. So we'll start with infill and bridging angle. That's all we need from that. And then we also have some stuff from layers and perimeters. And what we're looking for here is just perimeters and thick bridges. Then finally, from here, we're going to add a modifier, and we'll make it a slab. It'll have a thickness of 0.1 millimeters, the same as our layer height. And then we're going to position it at 0.75 millimeters. And so what we should see here is basically that this modifier is just flush with that inner top surface of the channel that the flex cable is going to go through. Okay, and so now that we have that, we're going to go back to our model, and the generic slab, we're going to use it to change the object settings. So the object itself, bridging angle, we're going to set this to 90. And we're going to check off thick bridges. Then we have the generic slab. Layers and perimeters. And we're going to change the perimeters here to 1. And then we slice. Let's get rid of that. Left over. And so now, if we go down, we should see, okay, we start with this first layer, second layer, and then third, fourth. We're just building up these walls along the side. Fifth, sixth, seventh, and eighth. Okay. And so here, what we see is we have only this one perimeter along the outside, and then we have the bridging that goes right across. And so the reason that I did that custom modifier there is so that the bridging starts here where it's already kind of supported, and hopefully that makes it stick to itself better and not get dragged along the surface of the flex cable, because as stated earlier, the TPU really does not want to stick to that. So I'm trying to get it to do everything I can to make it stick to itself so that the cable is not really a factor. Anyway, so this is our last layer before we do the bridging, so I'm going to add a stop here. And the message I have the printer display, or supposed to have a display, just says place cable in sheath and resume printing. Okay, so now I've added my stop, and when the print pauses here, I'll just put the cable in, then hit continue, and we bridge over it, and then finish up the part. Alright, so let's reslice that. And that's all good, so now I can send it to connect and get it started. Alright, so now the print is paused. And first thing, something I forgot to do with this is I should have manually set the seams to be on the corners so that they don't start in the middle, because what happens is you get this little bit of a blob of plastic that kind of forces its way in, and we want to get rid of that because it's going to interfere with the cable laying flat. Fortunately, it's not too hard to snip the ends off, but that was kind of an annoying oversight. Okay. And then now, I'm the double-sided tape. And for this stuff, it's a little bit too thick for the cable, so I'm going to cut the pieces in half lengthwise. I'll find the smoother side of the cable and put this right there. And so what I'm going to be doing here is I'll start by putting a piece of tape on each end, making sure it's nice and flat. And then what I'm going to do for the rest is make sure that I have pieces of tape everywhere that this cable is bending, because I'm going to use the tape to press it flat, and that should help quite a lot. I mean, I am also just kind of trying to get the tape basically along the whole surface, but especially where the cable is wanting to flux. Okay. And now that I've got that, let's take and start here, so I'll just press that down. Actually, there we go. Alright, gonna press that down. Looking from this side. See, there's a little bit buckling around there. And we are kind of getting a little bit peeling right here. So because the top is kind of peeling up, tape that down later, but for now, let's come back up and let's focus right around there. Okay, so it looks like there's a little bit of stringing or something going on here, so I've got a little bit of a non-flat surface. Just run over with the flush cutters and try to smooth that out. Oh, there's something. Let's get rid of that. Okay, now we just press that down. Still pretty hot, so I don't really want to touch it too much with my fingers. And just kind of press the rest of the way down. Okay. Like that as much as we can. Okay, and that guy's still peeling up a little bit, actually on both edges. So I'll just kind of use a bit of tape to stick it to the build plate. Okay, and now that we have that, it's still popping up on the sides. Well, okay, we'll just press that down. Hopefully this is not an issue, and we'll see. Okay, so now that that's finished, peel off the tape. And now, because it's TPU, this stuff just peels right off. Just trim that little bit of the leftover blob in the center. And here we are. And so here it is. Maybe not so easy to see on the camera, but the quality is actually pretty great. This is the bottom surface, which consisted of 2 layers, and this is the top. So nice and flexible, but I'm not seeing any clear gaps. So yeah, this should do a good job, I think, of protecting the cable, and still nice and flexible.